Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News.
President Buhari's decision to keep faith with as many as 12 members of his former cabinet going into the next dispensation has been the subject of widespread criticism among many Nigerians. There is a view in some quarters that many of the returning ministers had misused the first opportunity by failing to deliver on their statutory responsibilities. According to some people, these same returning ministers were an integral part of a team that superintended over a period when Nigeria's economy not only slipped into recession, but has been flirting with the prospect of depression up to the moment. Why then, as the president decided to go for more of the same? For a conversation on this, we're now being joined by Chike Ogeah, a lawyer, an aviation expert, and former commissioner for information in Delta State. And together on this session with him is Etim, a journalist, banker, currently the chief executive of Stan Meyer Communications, a PR consulting firm. Gentlemen, Chike, welcome to the program. Chike is with us in the Lagos studio.
Thank you.
And Etim Etim is in the Abuja studio. Etim, good morning. Welcome to the morning show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome to the morning show. Well, gentlemen, this first question is for both of you. What's your assessment of the portfolios as assigned to the ministers appointed by President Buhari? Was it worth the wait? And what do you think of the distribution of portfolios? And what are your thoughts in terms of balance, equity, gender sensitivity, and all of those issues that have been in the public domain since the ministers were inaugurated on Wednesday? I'll start with you, Chike, then we'll go to Etim.
Fine, thank you for having me. But that's the problem with you, Ruben. You know, we do the Sunday show. Your questions are always loaded. So one does not even know where to start from. But basically, what I'll say is simple. The president is the chief driver of the process. He knows what his deliverables are. He knows he has the template of what he wants to see. It's a pity that we don't see governance as a continuum in Nigeria. I think that is where the first issue really is. Because if we do, then, just like you said, coming in from the good luck, after those very, very tortuous elections we went through, and, those, if you ask me, are the real problems with Nigeria. We are too political. We are too heavy on the political side. So there is a lot of schisms and a lot of shaking that goes on. The turbulence from the politics now takes us into governance. And before we even know what's happening, we've lost so much time. There's been so much animosity built up that the whole verb for governance is almost lost. That, I think, is the main crux of the matter. Our politics has to be less toxic for us to be able to make way in Nigeria. As long as this politics of winner take all, you're my enemy, I'm going to kill you once I get there. Some people live to get into office so they can destroy other people. You see, that cannot be the way to development if that is our ultimate goal. And like I said earlier on, yes, the president, it took a while, 3 months this time or so, for constituting the team. The team he constituted are Nigerians like me and you. He brought back practically every minister that was there with him and put them back in the same portfolio. Of course, he moved some around. People will ask a few questions here and there. Like I said, maybe because the place is too political, because whether you like it or not, this is a wholly political cabinet, but, going forward. But the kind of questions people ask, you take away an Ibe Kachiku from petroleum and you put in a silver. They are both sons of the South. But one is a known technocrat, and all that. Something must have happened. Politically, he was there. Why didn't he come back? What political value is he to the equation? Those are the issues now. Silva himself has worked in the industry, was an essay to a minister there at some point. He was the governor. So we wish him well, the same kind of thing goes. My dear friend, the Minister for Power, Housing, and I'm very happy that portfolio has been unbundled because that is a very brilliant man, a very brilliant mind. And we know also from my time in government, I can tell you that one of the major reasons why when you put brilliant people into places and you don't get the deliverables you expect from them, it's because of funding. Nobody is a magician. Well, no matter how you put into a place and it doesn't have the required funding to do the work, you're not going to get anything from it. So now that thing is broken down, fine. Whoever goes to power, I hope he gets, the man there gets the requisite funding he requires, and then Fashola, who did so well in Lagos, everybody knows as a two-term governor here, did very well with the roads. He built that fantastic bridge in Lekki and all that. Then let him concentrate on the roads, because the network of roads in Nigeria has totally collapsed. We also saw what he was trying to do with the Lubirin project here in Lagos about housing. Nigerians need houses. There was hardly anything done in that, obviously, because when you put those kind of issues on the scale with power, which is the major driver of the economy, we haven't done very well with those. So he can now concentrate on that as well. So there are all those little things that were done. But, to my mind, I just think that the major problem is that we are too heavy on politics, and the politics is toxic. Then, again, I think, like everybody agrees, our major problem is the economy. And I don't really see an economist there. That's my problem.
Well,
you see,
Chike, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, more or less the same position held by Kingsley Moghalu yesterday, when he said that this cabinet that we have before us is political and that it's not been constituted to address the major problem facing the country, the challenge of economic crisis and of a widespread poverty. But Etim Etim, if you're still with us, you must have listened to Chike. What's your own take on this subject? You being an economist, a journalist, and then a banker.
Thank you, Ruben, again for having me. First and foremost, I'm relieved that the government is now fully composed. I mean, it was worrisome that the delay was taking so long. Yes, so many politicians in the cabinet, because the political class was really piling pressure on the president that they too had to come in and help and work. So I think the political class is now happy that they have roles to play. I would have liked to see some more technocrats, especially those that come in from the multilateral systems. It would have been nice to have a sprinkle of them too. Your guest in Lagos says we need economists to build economy. Not necessarily so. There are economists at other levels of government. There are economists in the central bank. There are economists who are PEMSECs. So it's not only ministers that need to be economists before economy could be created. There are various levels of governments where you have economists. The important thing is that the president has laid out his vision. The important thing is the vision of the president. He needs to have 100 million Nigerians lifted out of poverty in the next 10 years. That is 10 million Nigerians per year. So the government will now have to sit down and design the strategy for this. And the main focus to achieve this will be in agriculture, where the government has already done some level of work. So I'm not very sure that the absence of those who studied economics in the university will impact negatively on the performance of the government. The major issue is that we have economists everywhere at various levels of government, and the president has set his vision. And so the vision of the president has to be pursued vigorously by people in governments and even in the private sector now.
Take a look behind the veil. Both of you have made references to interesting points. Mr. Ogeah here, you talked about funding.
Yes.
And that sort of being a handicap in some cases. Mr. Etim, you talked about the fact that even though we don't have economists as ministers, their permsecs, their directors within these ministries. So let's take a look behind the veil. How do ministries actually work? Because right now what we have is a situation where all that has been made public is the sort of chain of reports to the president. If you're a minister, you have to go through the chief of staff or through the SGF to reach the president. But what has not been made public are their key performance indicators or areas. It has not been made public what exactly the scope of work for ministers of state may be. But we also do not know how ministries actually work. How much responsibility do the ministers actually hold, or are they mere figureheads? So I'm going to start with you.
Before I answer your question, let me just clarify something he said. Yes, you see, when I speak from experience. I don't know whether he's ever been in government, but I was actually in government with one of the icons of the Nigerian system in terms of government. I went into government as an aide to Chief Philip Aseodu in 1999. He was then the chief economic advisor, and he was in charge of the Ministry of National Planning, or the National Planning Commission, as it was called. And he was also the chief debt negotiator, because those years before 1999, when the military was in charge, they hardly had any conversations with the multilaterals he talks about, that he said he wanted people to come from the system. So here Nigeria was, he had this huge debt, which was really more of interest, compounded interest, than more of the principal he took, because nobody was talking to them. So Chief Aseodu came, looked at the whole thing, put a position paper together. In fact, that was when Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala was seconded from the World Bank and was working with him, and they were both working with the president. And that was how the whole Paris Club debt, we got the forgiveness and all that went on then. And what I realized at that time, from the few travels we also went through, was that maybe the most key area of government is the National Planning Commission. In fact, in most other countries, most of the Asian tigers that were same level of development with Nigeria in the 70s.
Well, Chike, you know,
yes,
we need to take a short commercial break. When
okay,
we return,
okay,
you can speak further on how important the Ministry of National Planning is,
okay,
and whether it's a good idea to merge it with budget and finance.
Okay.
We'll be right back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the morning show here on our Rice News channel. Still with us here in the Lagos studio is Chike Ogeah, an aviation expert and former commissioner for information in Delta State. And in our Abuja studio, we have Etim Etim, a journalist and a banker and a PR consultant. Now, Chike, before we went on break, we were talking about the value, the significance of national planning.
Yeah, because you see, in Nigeria, I think from the 60s, how it was programmed was that the National Planning Commission, like I said, will be the chief driver, especially for plans. You know, we then had a rolling plan. These are what you call these KPIs now you talk about. There will be an 8-year, there will be a 10-year, there will be a medium, there will be a small, and a short, medium, and long-term plan. And that was why the budget process, the budget office, was in the National Planning Commission. That was how it was. Like I said, in most of those Asian tigers, Malaysia, Singapore, this National Commission is actually in the presidency. You see it right there. It walks next door to the president. Because the Ministry of Finance, you know, like they say, you need two hands to clap. I look at the budget and national planning process. Yes, okay. I look at the national planning and budget process as one hand, and I look at the Ministry of Finance as the second hand. That is the operational one, that you know. But the people that drive the plans, of course, then there's the central bank. So that kind of tripartite axis. Central bank obviously is in charge of the monetary policy. This guy's in charge of fiscal operations generally. And then these guys will drive everything to do with the planning. And now they have merged it all together. Fine, it still doesn't matter, you know, if, like I said, the president is the one sitting there right now. He knows the template he wants to use. I guess that's what Etim is alluding to. And if it fits, because you see, there's no handbook for this thing. I think it's just convention, and the way people did it, the way it worked for them, it could have worked for Malaysia or Singapore, and maybe it won't work for Nigeria. But I would have thought that if the budget and the planning commission was separate, and then they work in synergy with the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, then we'll be able to get all the derivables we require. And that was why I said we needed an economist in that level of government that would lay out all these things you talk about. I'm not unmindful of the fact that there are economics everywhere. In fact, I think there's an economist that is in the office, that's domiciled in the office of the vice president. It's just that he doesn't speak much. He doesn't tell us so much about what is happening. He could be the one that the government wants to use as its economist. There's nothing wrong in that, because Nigerians fail to understand that the office of the president and the office of the vice president are really one office. So it doesn't even matter where you want to locate it.
Well, but in any case, the government will need a very sound chief economic advisor and also a very strong Director General of Budget. But they have Ben Akabueze.
Yes.
And Ben Akabueze is a very competent man. But Etim, would you like to respond to some of the points that have been made by Chike Ogeah, and then address the question that the president, in constituting this cabinet, has been more sensitive to political patronage, 97% to 5%, with most of the super ministries going to his own geopolitical zone. And then, of course, he was in, was it Kaduna yesterday or so, where he told them that, well, he has tried to compensate them, Kaduna and Kano states, for giving him the bulk of the votes. Should that be the consideration, or competence, merit, ability, rather than loyalty and votes?
I think if we can have a combination of both competence and reward for loyalty. I mean, both are not mutually exclusive. So if the president thinks that he can give the bulk of the heavy positions to people of the Northwest, I'm sure, I don't know them, I don't know those appointees, but I would want to believe that there are people who are capable. The president himself has made it clear that he wants to leave a legacy. So it's now behoved on him to appoint people that will help him to succeed in those areas. Ruben, clearly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not particularly worried about where anybody comes from. It has never really been what concerns me most about Nigeria. I just need the job to be delivered and done. And that is why I have to go back to what Tundun asked. What are the KPIs for these ministers? Nigerians need to know. They were on a 2-day retreat just before they were inaugurated. We need to know what the KPIs are for each of the ministers. What are they expected to deliver in the first, second, third, and final year? That's more important to me than where somebody comes from. And in terms of mix, I would also have liked to see more women. I think there are just about 6 or 7 of them, but they are very capable. I've seen their profiles. I would have liked to see up to 10 women in the cabinet. Women always deliver wherever they are, especially the competent ones, because they have to work harder to be seen to have achieved.
Great point there, Mr. Etim. I'll take that. And thank you for going back to my question. I would have wanted more than 10, but we do have a lot to prove, and we do tend to over-deliver, actually. But I would like to go back to the question that I asked you about just the fact that people don't, the general public, might not understand the process of governance. You referred to that again just now, Mr. Ogeah, about people just not understanding how things work. I want us to, as I said before the break, just take a look behind the veil. What is the role of directors, perm secs, vis-a-vis the minister, then the minister vis-a-vis the minister of state? All of these things need to be clearly delineated so that we know we don't have the wrong expectations and we know who to hold accountable for what.
Sundar, can I add on to that for the sake of time as well? The Ministry of Aviation, because you're an aviation expert as well, what do you think about the return of the Minister of Aviation and how that's going to play out?
Okay, let me start with yours first, really. And government has always worked in that order. And the first and the most important thing you should know is that the permanent secretaries, who are civil servants, who are the ones that are the repository of everything that goes on, because it's like they say, you know, this minister will come, this minister will go, but that perm sec will be there. Fine, they change them all the time, they rotate them, but that office is there. That is the coordinating, that is the engine room of the ministry. He is the chief accounting officer. You see, that is why there's hardly anything any minister can do in terms of money, in terms of fraud and all those things we hear about that would be done without the connivance of the PAMSEC. Because the PAMSEC is actually the one that signs the check. The minister does not even sign a check. All he does is give directives, we need this, X, Y, Z, and everything is passed on to the PAMSEC. And between the PAMSEC and the Director of Finance, they sort all that out. So the operation of the ministry is really under the PAMSEC. The minister is just the political head to give that direction for the ministry and the attainment of the goals, the KPIs that he spoke about. That is obviously the intention of the administration. Then you asked another question. You talked about the
ministers of state.
Of state, okay. Usually they are alienated. These are things that you see. It's just that it's not in the public domain now. For instance, in aviation, like you said, in the Ministry of Transportation, there was a time when I went in there as the managing director of Sky Power Aviation Handling Company in 2006. The Ministry of Aviation was a standalone ministry. And they supervised all their parastatals, FAN, NAMA, SACOL, as it then was, you know, and all these things. And we reported directly to the minister, of course, and the PAMSEC was in charge of the ministry. Somewhere down the line, I remember, I think it was Yaradua, he came in and he did exactly what was done before. And there was a Ministry of Transportation, and I think the first minister of that ministry was Desiani Alison Madweke. There was also, of course, a minister of aviation, which was now a department, so to speak, in transportation. And it all had to do with this cutting cost of governments and all that. But of course, there was friction because usually the aviation is a very specialized area, and it's somewhere where you need someone that has that specialized knowledge to drive it. And maybe the other minister, the big minister, the substantive minister, is one that does not have that competence. And there could be this friction from time to time. And I think Yaradua saw that and reverted again, you know. And the ministry came back and we had our own minister and all that, all through the privatization process that I was driving at Skyway Aviation Handling Company up to when we exited from government. So what I'm saying is that right now, the coming back of that minister, I think, is the best thing that's happened to that ministry in terms of the fact that they have a professional, not necessarily that man, it could be any professional in the industry. But the aviation industry right now is at a critical point. It's in a stage where there's about to be a total and imminent collapse of that industry if very, very critical decisions by professionals are not taken. So this new minister has his work cut out for him, and I'm sure he knows that. He has to work with all the stakeholders, the unions, all the different agencies, and we have to bring back. Aviation used to be the best in Africa when Nigeria Airways was, up and running.
Let's go to Etim, in Ogeah Etim. Tundu had asked a question about key performance indicators. Beyond the mandate defined by the president, working as a team, addressing the challenges of insecurity, economic crisis, and fight against corruption, what would you say should be the key performance indicators for these ministers? And do you think that we have square pegs in square holes, right? Is that how it is said? Because Leila had asked a question about whether Adi Sirika's return to aviation is in order.
Well, let me speak briefly on aviation before I go to the other aspect of your question. Well, I think Sirika is renowned in the industry. He's been a professional, and I think he's done fairly well in the last 3 years. But let me also note that since 2012, June 2012, this country has not recorded any accident involving commercial airliner. That's 7 years now of accident-free aviation as far as commercial airplane is concerned. That is the longest we've ever had, the longest run of safe aviation we've ever had. And it's one of the longest in the world. I must commend the professionals who are working in that industry. There must be something that they are really doing well that has achieved this. Now, in terms of key performance indicators for the government, Ruben, we all know that this country has very severe problems, largely economic, and because of the economic problems, we now have security challenges. I believe that it is the severe economic challenges of the last few years that is spawning this insecurity we are seeing in the system now.
Etim, we don't have
So
much more time left on this segment, so we'll have to thank you and Chike Ogeah for honoring our invitation to appear on the morning show. Thank you, Etim Etim. Thank you very much, Chike Ogeah.